Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Family and Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, being held here at County Hall in Morpeth. Before we start this morning, I just want to make a quick announcement. Obviously, you'll be aware that there were some changes made to the composition of this committee yesterday at full council. So I want to put on record my thanks to Councillor Gordon Stewart, who was the former deputy or vice chair of this committee. And that position has been taken by Councillor Richard Dodd. We also have some new members on the committee, so I'd like to welcome Councillor Daniel Carr, who's with us this morning, represents a seat in Blythe. Obviously Councillor Dodd, who unfortunately, I think Leslie will come on to apologies in a minute, and Councillor Dunbar, who is a Cramlington councillor. So just on that point, obviously it was just to note our appreciation to Councillor Stewart. So if we can start off with the agenda proper. So Leslie, if we can start with apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Dodd, Councillor Dunbar, Lynn Houghton, and Paul Rickard has advised that he may be late.
Thank you very much. If we can now move on to the next item on the agenda, which are the minutes from Thursday, the 7th of October. What I plan to do is go through those minutes page by page. If you have any items on those minutes that you wish to pick up as a point of clarification, please do so. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and finally page 6. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll take it that I can actually sign those off as a true record of the meeting. I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for that. We then move on to disclosure of members' interests. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest which they haven't already declared on their declarations? John Sanderson.
Hi, I'm an employee at Kylo House. Is that a member's interest? I haven't mentioned it previously, and I was just thinking about this the other day. And it regularly gets a mention. Anyway, I'm an employee at Kylo House.
You are an employee.
During the
you aren't an elected member, so we have elected members fill in a different declaration. I don't know if anyone can perhaps... We will get clarity on that, but in the meanwhile, I'm sure you'll be a proud advocate and champion of Kylo House. In the meanwhile, but we will thank you for raising that. Any other points that anyone wants to raise? No? Okay, that's great. So we're moving on now over to Chris. So forward plan of key decisions, which is pages 7 to 10 in your agenda.
Thanks, Chair. The forward plan is an opportunity for members to identify anything that they might want to bring to the committee. There isn't really anything on there for facts other than the Northumberland Strategic Skills Plan, which will be coming to this committee in December.
Thank you very much for that one. Now we move on to the agenda proper, which is item 5, Performance and Finance Report for Children's Services. I think this is being taken by... it's you. Okay, fair ahead. There we are.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Hartwell. I'm Senior Manager for Performance and Systems Support, and I've prepared this report on behalf of Kath McAvoy-Carr. Members will have recognised it's the latest in a series of these reports that comes to this committee. And like the previous version, in the appendices there is a benchmarking comparison that presents how Northumberland's latest performance data compares with the latest national averages that we have available to us. And where there isn't a national average available, the asterisk represents how we compare to the position the previous year. As with previous reports, Section 5 presents greater detail in terms of how Northumberland's performing against these national averages, but also where there are any issues with regards to targets not being met or about performance declining. There are explanations about that, as well as a clear understanding of the actions being undertaken as well. I won't go into detail about each of the performance indicators within the report, but I would like to draw attention to both some notable changes and also, I guess, some standout features as well. So within Appendix A, and those are the graphs at the very end, members will note that In spite of the challenges of the pandemic, Northumberland has remained in touch with all of its 19 to 21-year-old care leavers, and that's better and ahead of the national average. More children leave care as a result of them being adopted within Northumberland than is the case than is the national average, significantly more so actually. And one of the benefits of this report moving from October to November is that we've got some more recent statistics, and members will have noted the reduction that has happened over the summer with the number of children who are looked after, and in real terms that has reduced from around 435 to around the 400 mark, and it's been relatively stable around that mark for the last month. With regards to Appendix B, that looks at the comparative data around education and skills, the really notable features would be that Northumberland continues to be significantly better than the national average when it comes to parents getting the first choice of school. That's both within the primary sector and within the secondary sector. There are fewer exclusions in the last academic year compared to the position in the previous year, and that's within the context that that schools were open for longer, fully open for longer within the last academic year than they were previously. And we continue with a position of more children receiving the entitlement to statutory education in the early years as well. That's significantly better than the national average. And also notable that significantly more children, more pupils are in education quickly after a permanent exclusion than was the case last year. That's improved by around 25%. The report also presents the end of August position with regards to finance, which has been provided by colleagues in the finance team. And I think that probably covers the key points within the report, but happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much. Comprehensive and succinct at the same time, Alan. Are there any comments? Councillor Renner-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. As the portfolio holder, I'm actually very pleased with this report. I get regular updates on the performance of our department, and I think the fact that it's doing as well as it is testament to the skill and expertise of the staff we have. It's very difficult to compare the previous year to years gone by for obvious reasons. I think I will very much look forward to the same report we get next year and see if those trends continue on, or whether they're just short-term blips where things haven't gone as well. But I suspect they're just short-term blips related to COVID, that it'll be the same across the country, and we'll have a better idea next year about long-term trends.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodgson.
Yeah, just on the section where percentage of pupils are in good or outstanding secondary schools, obviously we're below the national average on that. But as you say in the report, that you've got the school improvement partners who monitor and challenge the schools. Presumably, with their expertise and knowledge of the schools, they can confidently forecast trends. So therefore, has the authority got data which says that we're likely to significantly improve that percentage, given the monitoring of the SIPs? Although obviously you're behind with Ofsted because of the pandemic and what have you, but is there data from the SIPs feedback to say that this is going to improve?
Audrey, do you want to pick up on that one? So Audrey Kingham, Director of Education, will pick up on that one.
Yes, we do have a number of data sets and reports which give us schools that cause concern across the year, or indeed schools that improve as well across the year. So we do have some internal data sets that we could provide. David, I think, is here. In fact, he's directly behind me, so he might be able to elaborate and give you some more specific information should that be necessary.
In terms of SIP judgments of where schools are at, that is an area which has improved quite dramatically in maybe the last 4 years. A while ago, there was some question about whether we knew the schools well enough. We do know the schools well enough now, and what the data is telling us is that the SIP judgments are much more closely linked to the actual Ofsted judgments that come out. There is the element. Sometimes there is a different view between the Ofsted inspectors and the school improvement partner. We discussed those differences with Ofsted directly in our termly meetings with the regional leads for Ofsted. And actually, on occasion, sometimes those regional discussions do lead to the lead inspector possibly leading in our direction, but usually the horse is bolted at that point. In terms of predictions going forward, yes, we can come back with what we think will happen. The difficulty is there is some variance in the Ofsted inspector judgments sometimes, which won't blindside us. We're never far away, but can sometimes fall the wrong side of a line where we'd fallen on the other.
Yeah, but in general terms, the trend is an improving trend in terms of forecast.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
In the primary sector, we are, have moved on and are now above national averages on a lot of those measures. The secondary sector is a little bit more challenging, just in terms of we've got lower numbers. So actually, when one school drops one side of a line or another, it can be a great increase, which obviously we'd love to take the credit for, but at the same time we've got to balance that out with the fact that another school drops the other side of the line, and then that can cause what would look like a large percentage decrease because of the numbers of secondaries we've got.
Thank you for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's fine. It's just
Okay.
you just
Sorry,
talk
Owen,
positive
could I
about
just
it.
Sorry,
add,
yeah,
sorry, could I just add just a little further point of clarity, because I think David was being probably a little bit modest there. Actually, the team of school improvement partners that we have work tirelessly with the schools in order to help them understand their current issues where we are able to do so. I think the other thing that David's team have done on a number of occasions is actually go out at the point of a conclusion of an inspection and perhaps point out some of the areas that the regulatory inspectors may not have seen or may be in disagreement about, and have actually helped to influence some changes in judgments or changes in outcomes in particular areas on occasion. So I think the school improvement team are not they don't just go into schools and say we think this. They actually work extraordinarily hard to help to shape and influence the outcomes for those schools.
Thank you. So I have three speakers now in order. They are Trevor Thorne, Councillor Dunn, and I think it was John Sanderson, and then Mark Swinburne.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'm looking at Appendix B again, and it's the little line, permanently excluded pupils back into education within 6 days. You know, that's marvellous, really, isn't it? And I'm just wondering what we put the improvement down to. How is it that, you know, we're getting these excluded pupils back in so quickly?
Thank you. Again, I'm going to echo Kath's comments around the work of the team. So we have a set of inclusion workers who work tirelessly in very individual circumstances. So there isn't a process and system which is applied to everybody. It is a very individualised process. So currently, and we talked about our numbers being so much lower in terms of exclusions. This committee, a couple of years ago, I think, set out a task and finish group around that additional work. As a result of that work, we've formed a number of smaller teams who are very focused, working with schools, working with parents, carers, working with the young people, and we get them into the most appropriate placement as quickly as possible and settle them down. We don't just leave them, we work with them and continue that work, and that's part of the if you like, the change that's happened significantly. And we've been really dynamic with that because we've had to change again across COVID. So this year we've seen in the last academic year we've seen a number of much younger children. So some of the work that we've done, we've invested in some play workers and family support workers to be able to enhance that team, do the work and make sure that those children are settled much more quickly.
Excellent, thank you.
Sorry, I don't know what's the matter with me today. I think the other thing I would say is I would commend the head teachers who we work with, actually, because they've been phenomenal in terms of their understanding of some of the inclusion work that we're doing, and the cultural shift that we've had has been really, I was going to use an Ofsted word, seismic then. It's been really good to see, actually, that a number of our schools have embraced the inclusion agenda.
Very good. But now move on to Councillor Dunn, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to refer to page 16 and obviously 23 as well, with the graph and the fixed term exclusions for SEN support being disproportionately high. I can understand the reasoning for this and sort of pleased that overall you think it's that long-term trend it will be going down. But where it says officers regularly meet to analyse the data, and schools who appear to disproportionately exclude are contacted and challenged, can you just sort of explain how they're challenged?
So if we can get Audrey Kingham to pick up on that one. Yeah.
Fairly robustly would be my answer and my response in terms of that. So again, it's that same team that I talked about with Councillor Thorne. Having a very direct conversation, as Kath said, head teachers are so much more aware. We understand the challenges that the schools are under more broadly. We want to be able to meet needs, but actually we go back to them and say, is that the right decision? Is it the right move? Has everything been done that should have been done? We very much champion, as you'll remember from the SEN report, the graduated approach, and have all of the steps being put into place to really make sure that that preventative work's there. And they are challenged on that, and it will be a key feature of some of our new model work moving forward as well.
So would it be fair to say, just taking on from that point there, that no school would get away with just identifying some challenging young people and just think, I don't want them on roll? There is absolute challenge, and that is picked up. So how would you know about, how would this be reported to you about this exclusion? Just so I think everyone understands the process.
So in the same, let me answer first. So yes, it would be absolutely accurate to say that nobody gets away with that. There is a very robust challenge framework. In the same way that Alan presents this report here, as an SMT, we look at that data monthly. So we understand what the differences are. Actually, we talk about it in SMT every week when we meet. So if there are issues and there are patterns and trends that arise, we discuss it, we agree the actions, and we go away and do the actions.
If I can bring in now John Sanderson and then Mark Swinburne after that.
Lovely, thank you, Wayne. A couple of points. The first one is on page 13, relating to care leavers, which I know can be very, very difficult, but we seem to have achieved a figure of 97% of care leavers appropriately placed, which seems massively impressive. Are we aware of which ones aren't, and are we doing much to kind of, because that'll not be a great number of young people. So that was the first question.
Yeah, so yes, we are. We have a really robust senior manager in place within our Northumberland Adolescent Service, who champions the relevant and promotes strong outcomes for our children and young people. She has a great team of people who help to support that and who share those visions, and actually they follow up any young person who isn't in appropriate accommodation, who isn't inappropriate, who isn't who isn't hasn't got the right level of support, and they continue to offer support to children and young people even when there might be a decline from that young person. They will still continue to offer on a regular basis. Oh, sorry, Graham also wants to come in there.
Lovely, thank you, Captain.
Just a bit more.
Oh, sorry.
No, just a bit more detail on this. Is that what we do is practice days where I and senior colleagues go and view the work of our care leavers in this instance. And one of the things that we were really struck by was the tenacity with which they keep the contact even with young people who are reluctant to keep the contact, and will talk and ensure the support is offered to them through the team, or the support that they do have, as opposed to just directly contacting them when they're not wanting to respond.
Excellent, thank you. Great piece of work. The second one is on page 16. Now, I know I emailed you, Catherine. Sorry, I haven't read your reply. Down on point 6, the first three questions there, the forecast position. I couldn't get my head around those figures there, and I've read them 20 times, so I do apologise. I've asked two colleagues at work to clarify them for me, and I just don't understand those three lines. So if we could have some clarification.
I think, as if by magic, Alan, give us the answer. Give us the scores on the doors, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've received some clarification from colleagues around that, and it is with regards to the first three lines in section 6, under children's social care. I guess to give the longhand version of this, and hopefully it provides a better explanation, the figure of 0.727 million forecast underspend is the overall position, and the difference between that and the figure of 0.867 million overspend figure, which is mentioned in the report, is a 1.594 million underspend, and that is the business as usual position. However, due to COVID-19, there is a 0.867 million overspend that the report mentions that the council is claiming back from central government, and that's via the COVID-19 grant. So hopefully that gives a bit more detail in terms of what those figures mean.
So just
John,
for
does that
clarity,
answer
because I can see you still. So just
John's
for
looking
clarity.
vague there.
I'm quite happy to sit in ignorance as long as somebody somewhere.
So just for clarity, and I think it is, Graham is smiling because this is the first time ever in a report it says underspend in children's services. So actually he's very, very happy about this. So there is an underspend in the business as usual work that we undertake. So that, whatever that figure is that Alan said, so underspend in the business as usual work, but an overspend in the COVID pressures. But the overspend in COVID pressures, we can claim some of that back, which means that we've still got an underspend, although it's not quite as good as the biggest underspend, but it is still an underspend. So just the headline you need to hear is children's services at this point of the year are underspending. And I'm saying that because Graham never has that in his issue. So I think we just need to celebrate that. So thank you.
And I
I
think
appreciate that. Could I make a request in future that if you've got stupid people like myself, we may need 4 or 5 more lines just to explain that. Yeah. Even if you put in brackets, I'm quite happy with that.
So the key headline, as Kath has just said, is there is an underspend, but trust me, it's not going to sit there, is it? No, we've got plans.
We've still got 6 months.
Yeah, we've got 6 months and we have plans, so it's not just going to sit in the bank. It's going to be used for exactly the purpose. But thank you for raising that. Very good point. Moving on now to Mark Swinburne and then Reverend Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. And as one who works in the public sector, I always cringe if my department turns around and say they've got an underspend, because that's sharply taken away from you and you get less to spend the following year. I've got a few things I'd like to run through. So on page 13, where we look at the rate of children looked after, and I know there's a report later in the committee which covers the whole of the North East, and it identifies that there's a trend in the North East, but it is welcoming to see that Northumberland rate of children looked after is the joint lowest in the region, so that's a really welcoming thing to see. Moving on, when we look at the percentage of children getting first choice school places consistently at over 97%, we'd all like it to be 100%. We really, in all honesty, it isn't achievable. But over 97% is a fantastic figure. And when we look at some of the neighbouring authorities, and I see on social media some of the massive fallout and arguments and upset that parents get, over 97% really is an exceptional figure. When we look at exclusions, there's a little bit on there about the fact that there's been no permanent exclusions of pupils with an EHCP for 2 years. When we did the task and finish group, there was a number of people, me included, that was shocked that we had permanent exclusions of EHCPs, and just couldn't get our head around why that was happening. And going back to what Councillor Dunn said before about the fixed term exclusions with EHCPs and SENs, and these have risen, and I am uncomfortable with that, and I know there's we really have some fantastic work that's done to get these figures down, but I'm still uncomfortable with this recent increase in those. And I wanted to ask if this has been an even spread, or if we've got a trend in the same areas, the same patterns as was happening previously. If we can identify, is it the same schools, and that sort of thing that is creeping back in as it was before. And finally, just one thing on page 13. Where we're looking at percentage of children in foster care, it says, we've undertaken a project to consider ways of further increasing the numbers of children in foster care. As chair of one of the local area councils, I'm going to put it out there that please use us please come along to the local area councils and use us to advertise that, book a session in, and, you know, just use the local area councils, please. Thank you.
In relation to that is a useful resource for us to consider, because we are always looking to recruit foster carers in any way, shape or form. So anything that we can do to promote the work that foster carers do, we will be happy to do. Graham, you'll be happy to go to a LAC, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
To do that.
I'll raise that with my senior manager for the service as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go.
In relation to the exclusions bit, I think I will hand over to Audrey to give probably a little bit more specific, but there are always areas that we've got more concern around than others, and some of those might be previous areas that we've had and previous schools or previous indicators. I think the message is that we are constantly challenging or trying to work with or understand what the reasoning and the rationales for that particular situation. And we know that COVID has particularly had an impact on those children with EHCP, so we kind of understand where those figures are coming from, but more work is needed in order to be able to prevent that from happening in the future. So I'll hand over to Audrey in case she's got some specifics that she wants to raise.
I think what we'll do for the committee is I'll do a short briefing note that just gives you a map, if you like, of what that might look like, and then that'll give you some assurance. I haven't got the figures, whether or not there's a hotspot to hand with me here now, but we'll do that briefing note to make sure you get it. As I said earlier, in particular, that's part of our issue discussion, and particularly around what we're calling our internal scorecard. So we look at this data really routinely and regularly, and that's something that's been introduced this year. It came from a number of sources. We now have a single source that pulls together, and indeed just been in discussion around having an immediate dashboard available on screens. That will be our aspiration over time, and you know, as such as your concern, that's ours on a daily basis, and where we're seeing that changes, it has sometimes a wider impact around where we place those children, and making sure that we get the right placement first time is much more important to us, so that we can try and provide stability much sooner.
So if I move on to Reverend Lennox now.
It's just following on a little bit from John Sanderson's point, if I dare say so. As a former chief examiner for GCSE statistics, I have to say that the graphs on page 17 and 18 aren't terribly clear. And wouldn't do too well in an exam, I dare say.
Sorry, do you mean the budget information? Is that what
The 2022 monthly budget graph,
Yeah.
and the one on the following page, the forecasts, etc.
Right.
They don't tell me a great deal.
So I think the narrative, it's in the wording, the narrative to explain those. But Alan, it sounds as though you're going to be put at the back of the class for this one. So do you want to, perhaps if you can, is it just a point of clarity you want on?
It's a point of clarity. They're not clear.
Okay.
The graphs are supposed to give us a picture.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, that I'm not getting the right kind of picture, especially on page 18, you know. What is that graph showing me?
Great. Alan, over to you.
Yes. Certainly I can take that back, and we'll look to get those graphs reformatted.
Yes. It has, if I dare say so, it has a lot of unnecessary areas, you know, from September to March, you know, there's nothing there. It doesn't need to be there. And the rest could be enlarged so we could see it a bit more clearly as to the different trends, etc.
We will pick that up in a point worth noting.
Apologies for that, because it's pretty clear to me, because I see these on a regular basis, so I understand them, and actually they're pictorially, that it's what we get in order to be able to understand where the underspends and the overspends are particularly, and also the trend over the year. So for me, they're pretty clear, but actually we took out a lot of the narrative because there was a lots of information about figures and that just didn't need to be in there. But we'll have a go at making those a little bit clearer. But that's what we use to kind of plot trends and monitor them. So I'll take your point on board.
Okay. Are there any other comments, observations? So on this item, we are asked to note the current performance how it compares to benchmarks, and to identify any further areas of scrutiny. I think we've covered this off quite well. Thank you as well, Audrey, for the point about creating that heat map for us. If I can flip that slightly, because there are obviously some really good examples throughout the county of excellent practice by schools supporting some challenging young people. So I'm guessing there is a mechanism for sharing good practice and to have support, possibly through SIPs, for some of those schools which perhaps may be on a hotspot map. So it'd be helpful if you can just perhaps include that in the report, or so give us a quick overview now.
I'll certainly do that. We've got a number of wraparounds for various schools, one of which, and Graham might talk around this a little, but we have a pilot around Team Around the School, and that's working jointly between children's social care and education. So I'll pick up on that.
Great.
And what Graham doesn't cover today,
Yeah.
I'll make sure we enhance that into
Great.
the briefing paper.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, in that point, we'll note the report and move on in the agenda to item number 6, which is an overview on children's homes and placement sufficiency, which I think, Graham, you're going to be taking us through this report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This report has been presented to you just to outline and highlight the details and issues relating to our placement sufficiency, because I know the committee has been cited on that. But what this will do is, I say, we'll detail highlight the key issues and challenges for us. But as we speak, we are currently reviewing and updating our sufficiency strategy. We've pulled that forward for a couple of reasons. One's because we were looking at some of the stability information across the year and wanting to make sure that we were providing the best placement options that we could for our children and young people. And similarly, there have been legislative changes that have come in that are detailed in the report. So whilst the sufficiency strategy was due to last until 2022, we've pulled it forward slightly and are currently reviewing and updating our sufficiency strategy, and the detailed strategy will be presented to the next meeting in January. So what we do here is the first page details the requirements on local authorities to provide sufficient placements for the children who are looked after, with some principles you would want them placed as near as possible to their home or local authority setting, trying to maintain the links with their family and support networks wherever possible, and that those placements meet those children's needs. And what we've got in there is a table showing the range of placements that we offer to meet the needs of our children who are looked after. And I'll go through just very briefly each of the areas there. So fostering, we've already touched on, and very appreciative of the offer from Councillor Swinburne there. But what we have done in Northumberland is really push and develop our in-house fostering capacity, because our experience and our analysis of fostering use is that our in-house fostering provision and support is more effective in terms of providing stability and care for our looked after children than the independent fostering associations, the IFA placements. So based on the quality of the provision, not just cost, we have significantly reduced the use of IFAs over the years and maintained that, and aim to make the provision, the use of our in-house fostering service as wide as possible. So moving on then to residential care, and that really is one of the biggest challenges for us, is meeting the complex needs of a few young people. And again, these are national and regional challenges, not just locally, and we'll refer to them probably in a later item about the independent national review of children's social care. But again, what we've found is that our in-house provision actually provides greater stability than those in external provision. You'll see and be aware of our plans to increase our in-house residential capacity in the 2 homes that I'll talk in a bit more detail about in relation to that. In terms of children exiting care, so we've got in Northumberland a higher percentage of children care moved from care to special guardianship allowances. So these are children who move out of care, are not looked after, but are placed with generally with family members. And what we've done is increased the support to those placements to make sure and provide support and stability to make sure those children and young people don't return into care unnecessarily. And the last bit really is the range of placements that we provide. We talk about our accommodation service for our 16, 17-year-old children who are looked after where they're not going to be looked after in a family setting or in a home. For a small number of those, we provide supported lodgings and a range of supported living arrangements for those children and young people. We've got specific processes in place to make sure they're of good quality and supporting them appropriately. Just in terms of future actions, and again further to what I've already described, one of the other ways we're developing our fostering services, we're part of a regional bid and development to develop a specific approach around fostering, which is called Mockingbird. This is a nationally recognised model of fostering, and we're going to see where we can support and develop some in-house provision relating to that as part of regional development work, as well as the range of things we do to increase the support and training for our foster carers, including the use of a non-violent resistance parenting approach. Given the complexity of some of the needs of the young people that we do have in foster care, this is really important work for us to support our carers in their care of the young people. We've talked a bit about the build of the 2 new children's homes. We've got planning permission for one site. We have put in a bid to the DFE, which we should hear about this month, to increase the capital available to us, because when the bid was originally put in 3 years ago, the monies available to develop 2 homes wouldn't be sufficient to do that now because of changing costs and pandemic, for a whole range of other reasons. So we're trying to increase that funding capital available for us to look at building those 2 new homes. And again, as we've indicated earlier, we'll do a more detailed briefing on that when we come with the sufficiency strategy in January. And the final thing, just for members to be aware of, is new legislation that has come into place. There's particularly the placements of children under 16. It is now illegal to place those children in unregulated placements. Now, what happens on occasions, and it's only ever as a last resort, there will be circumstances, usually with a child or young person with complex needs who has an emergency break, whose placement breaks down without notice, and that we have to find somewhere for them. Now, the availability of those placements is challenging for a whole range of reasons, not least including the Ofsted regulation requirements on children's homes in terms of that, and making those available for emergency provision is challenging. So on occasions, and we have had robust procedures and processes in place, we do have to rent properties which we then staff to support those children and young people for an emergency period whilst we locate a regulated place for them. Now, that is illegal since September. We have had no children in those placements this year, but that does remain a vulnerability for all local authorities across the country, as well as for us. And further to that, there will be increased regulation of placements for 16 and 17-year-old children who are looked after. That was mentioned in coming out of the recent spending review, but there's national push for increased regulation of those placements as well, which we will need to be cited on. Although I've got to say, our processes now for commissioning, monitoring and supporting those placements, 16 and 17-year-olds, is robust in Northumberland. And I've just had a look at a paper to make sure that is the case. So those are the main challenges and issues for our sufficiency and placing our looked after children. Obviously happy to take any questions on that, but there will be a detailed strategy presented to the next committee.
Thank you very much for that. Guy Renner-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think Graham's done an excellent appraisal of the report. I think I would just like to focus in on the fact that we're trying to do as much in-house as possible. It's long been an aim of the administration and the council to keep as many children in Northumberland as possible, which is, shows through here with our use of our own in-house fostering service, and also our investment into increasing our own children's home capacity. So those are the 2 things I would like to highlight. Thank you.
John Sanderson.
Thank you, Wayne. I think it's a very, very impressive report in what is a very complex area. One thing that stands out to me is on page 27, towards the bottom, 3rd paragraph up, where it's got in-house 845.5 days for residential placement, and we know the benefits of consistency, as opposed to 457 days in non-NCC. I just wondered why that was. It could be that we're just better, or is there a pullback because we want them in-house? Are we drawing those young people back sooner?
I think there are a range of reasons why that would be, but I think in terms of our selection of and the quality of our support for our in-house residential, and that is reflected in the Ofsted ratings as well, which no doubt you'll be aware of. I think that is the key factor in terms of the stability of those. And what we have found, whilst obviously there are positive, good provision in the private sector, what we have found is that they are more likely to give notice, short notice, which presents us with the problems that I've described in terms of those placements. And I think, again, I'll refer to the National Independent Review. Again, the placement sufficiency is a national issue in terms of the particular private sector, in terms of what they are able to provide to meet the needs and the costs of those. So there is a wider issue, and I think that us developing our in-house provision for the quality and the cost reasons are there. So I'm not sure if that's answered the question. I'll leave it. No, Kath.
So one of the challenges that we do have, and this again may not fully answer your question, but one of the challenges that we do have is around emergency accommodation for when placements break down. And what we know is nationally, there are very few children's homes who are registered to take children on an emergency basis. And likewise, we've got no in-house residential provision that can take children and young people on an emergency basis. And we need to think about how we balance that up with the current provision that we've got. Graham is right. The quality of our in-house provision is good or outstanding in almost all areas. And we are very proud of the quality of provision that we have. But we do know that we need to extend it. We're not alone in that. All of our regional local authorities are looking to extend their provision, and we're looking at different models to do that. So it's not just about us building a children's home and then and putting children in. What we want to do is to be able to replicate some of that very good practice that works elsewhere and bring that into our own provision to deal with some of our children who've got perhaps more complex needs or more challenging needs that we want to. And as Guy alluded to, we want more children to be accommodated or looked after within the Northumberland area, and not sent out to other areas where the risks of a breakdown of placement are much more significant. The care market is a real challenge. Currently we have placement costs that are rocketing, and we have local authorities who are vying against each other to get placements, and that is causing a challenge in the market. And the paper that I'm going to discuss in the one after next is about the care review that's being undertaken to help manage that, and that is a real challenge for us. We want the best for our looked after children and continue to champion the best for our looked after children, and we believe that we can offer the best for our looked after children internally within Northumberland.
Thank you for that question. Going to move on now to Daniel Carr. Welcome to the committee, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for having me on this committee. It's just on page 28 on future actions. It's the third paragraph down where it talks about the proposal to build 2 new 4-bedroom children's homes. And then it says, due to various complicating factors, the progression of the new build has been delayed. Do we know what the delays are?
Several issues. So one of those, I think Graham alluded to, so the costs of building have escalated quite significantly. So the funding that we had previously for 2 homes will actually probably just cover 1.5 homes. We are also, there is some potential funding available from the DFE, which we are awaiting an outcome, because we put a bid in for to the DFE in relation to some capital costs for build. The other issue that we need to be very cognizant of is that if we are building children's homes, whilst there's the capital funding in some respects is the don't want to say the easy bit, because it's not, but it's the first step, really, isn't it? We need to make sure that we've got the revenue to cover those costs, and that involves a bit of an investor save model. One of the areas that we had identified for a children's home build, once the further detailed surveys were done, it was revealed it wasn't an appropriate site for us to be able to build on, so we're in the process of trying to identify another area. And there are some opportunities with some of our other children's homes to be able to look at how we might reconfigure some of those homes to manage that. So a number of factors really is the answer.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's primarily around the planning permission and the range of things, and the subsequent site. Once we got planning permission on one site, the ground subsequently was found not to be suitable for a build for the mines and other things that on the site.
And I think as well, on a kind of wider context, I think there's a bit of myth busting as well about what a children's home is. I think there are some communities who think it's full of young tearaways outside, smoking, drinking and dancing on the roof. and it's far from that. And I think there's something about a bit of myth busting in our communities, because the clue is in the title. It's a home.
And that is a real challenge for us, actually, in terms of where we locate a children's home. We don't want to be in a position where the residents potentially are not appropriately informed about that, but equally we don't want it to be in a situation where there might be any animosity towards that particular residential establishment. And if you look at all of our other children's homes, there are very little issues in relation to the children and young people who are placed in those homes, and we want to try and get that message out more effectively, really.
Yeah. So the question was, where are the locations?
So we have one residential unit in Alnwick, we have a short break care unit in Alnwick, we've got one in Cramlington, and we have another in Bedlington, as well as our secure unit, obviously. That's the ones that we've currently got. We've got planning permission for a residential provision in Pegswood currently. No, none in the west. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but it is something that we are always looking at.
So that answers that question. So, I mean, obviously we've had a detailed discussion on this overview. We are getting a more detailed report in January, but I think it would be fair to say that we do need to grow more of our own provision on children's home. We've got Guy Renner-Thompson here, Cabinet Member Children's Services. So I think our mission is to look at him, smile at him sweetly, and say, go back to Cabinet and let's grab some of that £50 million underspend, which was mentioned yesterday in full council, from capital projects, and let's get some good business cases in for our children's homes. So small task for you there, Guy. So on that point, we note the report, and obviously we're looking forward to January's more detailed report. So thank you very much, everyone, on that point. We're now moving on to item number 7, which is page 31 in the report, which is social worker recruitment and retention. And I think, Graham, you're taking that as well, aren't you? It's great.
I am, thank you, Chair. Again, this paper is presented, actually, the issue came to corporate parenting groups some months ago, where one of the issues that we noted were the change of social worker for our children who are looked after, which is obviously not what we want. We would want consistency in terms of the working relationships that we have, and rising out of that, and I know this has been before this committee on previous occasions, about the challenges for recruiting and retaining social workers. Again, this is both a national and a regional issue, and I'm sure Kath will refer to that when we will look at the independent review as the next agenda item. But in terms of just briefly the paper itself and the position in Northumberland, the first element shows the national position in relation to some of the challenges for recruiting and retaining social workers. And just I'll take people particularly to the point at the bottom of 32, just in terms of the key features of what supports social workers to stay in there, about a supportive working environment, how they feel treated, and an organisation as a whole. And again, having been around in social work for a very long time, those are the key issues that are there for staff, rather than the issue of pay. That does come in, but not as a higher element. And I've got to say that one of the key elements that we do, again, referring to our quality of practice framework, we will consistently, as senior managers, do a whole range of forums, talk directly to our social work staff. And I've got to say, one of the consistent messages is how well supported they feel by their immediate line managers, by their colleagues, and by the organisation. But this is something we want to keep developing and building on. Excuse me. Okay, so, however, having said that, the Northumberland position in the last 6 months has been an increased challenge for us, with more of our social work, with the higher social work turnover. We have detailed in there, there is movement within the local authority as well. We do retain social workers who move to different posts within the authority, or promotions within the authority. But equally, for those that are leaving the authority, there are a range of reasons for those, and we do exit interviews every time our social workers leave, so we can look at the themes, of which there aren't consistent themes that we can obviously address. They move for a range of reasons, for a different role. For a small number, they aren't able to work further. Some have moved out of area for a range of reasons, including family reasons. A small number have gone to agency social work, which I can talk a bit more about shortly, because there is increased or more pay available for social workers, but I'll talk in a minute about how we are trying to manage that on a regional basis. I've got to say also our sickness record exacerbates where there are gaps, and our particular challenges are in 2 or 3 areas, and that does shift around particularly over the time I've been here, but we have got particular challenges at the moment in the South East area and in our disabled children's team and the 14 plus service, although just over the last couple of months those have eased slightly. One of the key things, and nationally what we need to do, is grow our own. That is, no authority in the country will consistently recruit and retain experienced social workers. So our strategy is that we grow our own social workers, and we've been in a good position with a very effective ASYE Academy, Assessed and Supported Year in Employment, for newly qualified social workers coming into our academy, where they have protected caseloads, they have significant training, development, support, reflection, a whole range of ways of easing those into the social work profession, and then moving them out into the teams where we have the vacancies and where the need is. And that has worked really well. And in analysing the cohorts there, whilst the first cohort we have had some of those leave, every other cohort to date we have been very effective in retaining them. So I think for us as a long-term strategy, this is crucial in terms of how we keep maintaining that. The other element that we've got to do is, just referring back to what the important elements for social workers, is the support to them. And as I say, social workers consistently report feeling well supported. One of the other actions that we've put into place, we've realigned our first line managers group to make sure that our first line managers are actually managing a smaller number of social workers, so they can give them more time, support and direction. And again, that has been received well by our staff and by our managers there, and we make sure that they're trained and supported to do that. I've talked in there about our practice model, just to make sure there's a consistent approach to how we're working with families, and again that is continuing to roll out effectively and well. I've talked previously about the practice days, making sure we have a cited on and talk regularly to our social workers, not just about the quality of the practice that is being provided, but about how they're feeling and how they're supported. And again, as I say, that is fed back positively and consistently. And again, we'll make the point, and I know we've made it in previous meetings, that throughout the pandemic, frontline social workers have maintained face-to-face home visiting contact with families where children have felt to be at risk of safeguarding and of harm, and have maintained that throughout that. And again, the point here is that we've recognised that, I think locally members have, but I don't think that has had the national recognition that I think it's deserved. So again, the challenges are continuing to maintain the retention that we want and recruitment. In terms of agency social workers, one of the challenges has been that agency social workers can command a lot more money than permanently recruited social workers. And there is some very good regional working around managing that. We've got regionally what is called a memorandum of understanding, where we have agreed rates that should be paid to agency social workers across the region, which will be slightly more than local authorities have, but what they don't get as an agency workers is things like the other benefits like sickness, absence, holiday leave, or no, those kind of things. So that rate's been set and is reviewed regionally. I chair the regional committee, the regional group which oversees the memorandum of understanding. And whilst there are some challenges with this, where occasionally authorities do break it or have an agreement to break that rate, the agreed rate, for various reasons. So we have had some of our staff leave to go agency for quite a significant pay increase for a particular authority, but that has been agreed because of the challenges faced by that authority. But we do maintain oversight and challenge within the region where we think other authorities may or may not be paying the agreed rate. So there's a range of things there. We've got other processes in place to continue to support and develop our recruitment, retention, our advertising processes to make sure that we're doing all we can to recruit and retain our social workers.
Cathy, do you want to come in on anything on that?
Just to say that this is obviously an area that is a constant issue for most local authorities. It would be fair to say it's probably the thing that keeps me awake at night the most. in terms of trying to ensure or being assured that we have staff to cover the work that needs to be covered. In actual fact, our vacancy rate is quite low because we recruit to the Social Work Academy so that we have a constant through flow of staff. So actually the risks within Northumberland are being managed in that way. One of the challenges that we have had really as well is about the pandemic has meant that social workers who would normally be in a room together supporting each other, discussing cases or discussing situations, seeking support, have not had that opportunity in the way that they previously had. Now, we were particularly concerned about the academy, the Social Work Academy, not getting that input to start off with. So we made a decision, or I made a decision earlier this year that the academy could come in and be based together on a daily basis in the way that they previously had, because we were worried that those staff wouldn't get the level of support that they needed. We are constantly thinking of new ways to recruit, but without breaking the memorandum of understanding that we have with the rest of the region, and that is a challenge for us. But I am confident that the Grow Your Own model that Graham has talked about, which includes not just the ASYE Academy, but also social work apprenticeships and identifying people who've already worked in the social care field to go through onto a social work apprenticeships, means that we are getting the staff with the right resilience coming through who understand what those social care pressures are. Social work in children's social care or in adult social care is not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination, and I think it's very undervalued on occasions. But we've got some tremendous staff who have done some tremendous work during a tremendously difficult period and continue to do so. I actually think that they need to be recognised as a group of staff who have ploughed on no matter what and carried on doing what they need to do despite the challenges that have been thrown at them.
Thank you. Before I go to member questions, so I've got Mark Swinburne, I've got Paul as well, so and Guy as well. So I'll go to Guy first. But before we do that, can I just drill down a little bit on this section on page 33, the Northumberland position? 16.99% turnover rate in the last year compared to 14.71. Obviously, you've alluded to perhaps some staff leaving to go to work for agencies in other areas. Are there any other reasons why the turnover is a promotion, so which has created a backfill position? What are some of the other reasons for that?
Yeah, there are a range of reasons. Again, move to go to agency. So it is a whole range of reasons, not one specific reason of why the movement is a whole range of reasons for that, those numbers of staff who have left.
Wayne, just in addition to that, we also have created a number of specialist areas and we have staff who move to more specialist areas. So they might have done safeguarding for a little while, but then we'll go off to do fostering, or we'll go off to do disabled children's team, or even some of the more specialist posts that we create within the organisation.
So in a sense, what we're doing is, because the training and the support is so good, one, they're getting poached, and the other one is obviously they're developing their career within the organisation, which is it's ironic really that we're doing so well that other people are coming to steal us. So if anyone's watching for other areas, stop doing it. Right, I'll come to Guy first, and then I'll go to Mark, and then I've got Paul at the back here.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, the recruitment and retention of social workers is a cabinet priority of mine, one of the 6 that I'm allowed to have. There'd be a lot more if I could just do what I wanted, but I'm only allowed 6. So it now will be part of the council's corporate plan, which will be coming to full council very shortly. I visited the academy. They're an excellent service there. It's an excellent. Going to visit them is an excellent insight on how it works, because I wasn't fully aware of how it worked. You go there, they're a very forthright group of all young women, I have to say. I did challenge them and say, can we get more boys and men involved in the in social care. They said that's a problem and it's something they want to look at. But if you want to know how that academy is working and how the system as a whole is working, I would recommend going down there yourself, or anyone on this committee, and talking to them, because they're the ones that will tell you how it works. And it's something that I'm very, very keen that we invest further in Northumberland and bump the numbers up in that academy. And I've said to my cabinet colleagues, if that needs more funding, then I'm more than happy to try and push for that.
Thank you, guys. So I'll come to Mark, and then I've got Paul, and then I've got Councillor Ball in that order.
Thank you, Chair. It's been said a number of times in this committee that it does take a special type of person to do social work, and I strongly applaud them. And I dread to think what position we would be in had we not brought in the academy a few years ago. And I'm aware that other authorities have looked on what we've done and are looking to follow that type of academy basis as well. I'm really pleased, Kath, to hear that you took the decision to carry out the face-to-face and to bring them in to provide that support. And also in the report, as what we heard, that the feedback where they've said that they are pleased with the support that they receive from the authority, because that's really welcoming to hear. When we talk about like people going off to agency, yes, it is a higher pay working for agencies, but in many situations it's not just because of the pay, it's because working for agencies has flexibility, and sometimes it meets with their lifestyle. So we need to understand that people don't just, for want of a better term, jump ship for more money. It's because sometimes what agency work has to offer meets with their personal circumstances. So it's not just a case of, oh well, if we started paying massive amounts then people would stay with us. That's not the situation. So a couple of things as well. I note the increase in absence rate due to sickness, and wonder how much of that could potentially be due to COVID. If we were to break down those figures, is anything in relation to that? And one more point, which I'm aware of, is I'm not sure whether the committee is aware, but we have one of our social workers who's up for an award as well, Kevin Waggett. Yeah. He's one of 52 who's up for a national award, and I just thought it was worth mentioning. Thank you.
So in relation to the, sorry Graham, were you going to, no, so in relation to the, so a couple of things there. You're right about the agency work. We've got social work, we've got an incredibly young workforce in social work, and actually the ability, having had 18 months of not being able to go on holiday, the attraction of working in an agency and then being able to say, right, I'm taking 6 weeks off to go and travel is is one example of that type of lifestyle that some of our young social workers just want to embrace as they progress through their careers. The other issue about the sickness and the COVID situation is we do monitor the COVID related illness against ordinary illness, against other illnesses. And we know that during the lockdown, sickness was much less because people could more effectively work from home. And as lockdowns have been released, people can't work from home in the same way. So we know that that's a challenge for us. We also know that they are more likely to pick up viruses and illness. So we're trying to encourage people where they're feeling poorly not to come into work and to work from home or manage their work from home until they're feeling better and those viruses. So we're trying a number of ways to help to manage that moving forward. So.
I'll shout on there. Just the other pressure, I think, for social workers, while we do have some in the offices which is necessary for operational reasons in terms of giving emergency responses around duty and managing those things, still the majority of them are working from home and trying to find ways to make sure that support is as effective as possible to deal with some of the stresses and strains of doing that job, not being able to be in an office consistently just to share that with your colleagues, and actually having that coming into your home and having to deal with there is a challenge for our social workers, which we have tried to manage and make sure we've got a range of supports, but obviously within the overall corporate position of trying to keep our staff safe as well is a challenge and a tension at times, and we're looking at ways of making sure, and all again, as I'll just, you picked up the point, Councillor, that our social workers do feel supported in a whole range of ways through peers and through managers in terms of keeping in touch with them as well.
Paul Rickard.
Thanks, Chair. I think just to echo that Northumberland's Academy is seen as the envy of an awful lot of local authorities throughout the region where I go to meetings like this. I guess for me it was, you almost create such good social workers to then become the envy of others who look to poach straight away, which you've touched on. And I just wondered if there's any early warning systems in place to kind of almost highlight those members of the team that might be vulnerable. And linked to what you said there, Kath, about flexible working, is the team able to have that flexibility, if it's a young team, to look at opportunities to say, actually, you can have a sabbatical for 4 weeks as opposed to 6 to go and do something? And something else you picked up on, which I think has been a worry in education as much as anywhere else in social work, is the informal networking of sitting in a room together and just being able to talk about pressure and what the staff are doing. I think it's significantly underestimated at the moment. And I'm finding in this other circles I work in that actually getting back to being able to have those in a safe way is so vitally important. And not even the formal agenda, but just those periods of time which can be built into the day where people can just talk to each other. And I just think this is so key and so important, and it's gone such a long way in Northumberland in a positive direction. It just feels really fragile. So I think if there is finance to say, actually, for a temporary period, we bring in more into the academy just to give that flexibility and ease the pressures, because we're going into winter. Sadly, it's only going to get worse again. It's just something which I think is something which causes sleepless nights. So if there is any funding or anything else that can be done to support this team, I think it's really important.
Paul, some excellent questions, and I'm smiling here at Graham. You might have a change of policy here. Let's see. Go on.
No, I think the idea of picking up informally is absolutely right. We do, and one of the strengths again is the regularity of the supervision, support and oversight from the managers, and we will look at individual circumstances where there are pressures or particular wishes with individual staff. We have taught very much the academy to learn from them as well. So one of the things with the first cohort that we learned is how we moved them from the academy into the teams and the process for doing that. So they're not in the academy much more protected and supported and suddenly get a cliff edge and effectively go out in the team and crack on with it. We've actually developed and evolved our transition from the academy into the teams to make sure that is smoother, gentler, if that be the word, to make sure we're not that we're retaining them and that's passed over more effectively. I think that is reflected in the increased retention of the cohorts subsequently to that. We're also looking at how we can use the academy more effectively to support training and development of staff on a wider basis in terms of that. And another point is just about the variety of roles that may be available within Northumberland. There's always a challenge here where we do create a specialist role that will create interest. We recruit internally to that and creates the vacancy behind it as well. But that's some of the tensions we have to manage, but we have done that effectively. We've created, for example, a parenting assessment team that is working well. We're looking at other options for developing more specialist roles and work within Northumberland to help support our retention of more experienced staff. And I think the point about making sure we keep the academy pushing through to fulfil the vacancies in the locality teams is crucially important.
Could I just ask as well, because I think Paul raised a couple of really interesting points there, could we do a little bit of a deep dive in terms of your conversation with either looking back at exit interviews or looking at existing staff and finding out if things like flex working might be an incentive? I appreciate that would put pressures, but I think if, you know, I'm sure you're onto this, but I think just asking the question, because it's about that package of benefits coming to work for this county offers, in addition to the support in the job, which could be the difference between retaining and losing. So I just think it's just an informal piece of work there, which is a kind of an officer level, but I think that might be quite helpful.
The point's absolutely right, and I think reflecting on the fact that sickness levels, for example, were lower mid-pandemic for a range of reasons, but actually I think all of our staff would look at a hybrid model, a flexible model of working as being key. There are some challenges with being able to offer that consistently in terms of maintaining a consistent service delivery as well at all points through the week, the weekend as well. But absolutely, I think that's the right point. We continue to look at that. Absolutely fine.
If I can bring in Councillor Ball now, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I've got a few questions and points. So the retention from the academy, what are the actual rates, and are we looking into, are people leaving during the time in the academy and going to join other authorities? And come the end, are they staying for us for a certain period of time? It's just that investment that we are putting in. Also, the exit interviews that we do, are they done by independent people, not within the department? Because if you're being interviewed by somebody that might be your superior, there might be conflict there. Also, I'm just thinking a little bit outside the box here. We're saying that we're losing people to agencies and to other local authorities. Is there not some kind of way that we can set up a cross-boundary agency of our own, so we're not paying agency fees? Because ultimately, if we're losing staff because they're going for more flexible terms and conditions, etc., why don't we look outside the box and stop paying private companies to staff here when we have people that obviously, if they do want to go, I think that there is room for manoeuvre on that one. And just one last thing, what support do we give for our social workers within our teams, including the senior management team, because it is a high-stress job, high pressure, and at the end of the day, if you can go and work in a less stressful environment for the same amount of money, you can understand why people are leaving the profession. Thank you.
Questions there? Kath, do you want to pick up on some of those?
We'll manage them between us.
We'll do a double act. There you go.
We'll manage those between us. Good grief. I feel like I needed a script there. So in relation to the retention of the ASY Academy, the first academy was probably about 2.5 years ago now, maybe even slightly longer, to be fair. So actually we would expect that we would have some movement on from there. And, you know, whilst we don't like it, we know that social workers do move around because they get a breadth of experience in different particular specialisms or different areas. We haven't got the exact details of that, but we can bring that back. Actually, that you know, you raised an interesting point about that. We were concerned about the cohort previously, because they weren't in, and there was a high level. There were a number of areas that I was worried that we might lose people to sickness, or we might lose people altogether, which is why we took the decision to bring them back in at that point, because I was worried that they weren't receiving that group support that you get from being in an office. But we can get an individual report. Graham, did you want to come in there?
Well, it's just about just reinforce the point about the ASY over the period of time. The first cohort, we have had some staff move off from there, but every other cohort, the retention has been significant. I think we've probably lost 1 or 2 of the subsequent cohorts. So I think as we've amended and learned how best to do it, I think that to date has been effective, but obviously that's a longitudinal study we need to keep on top of about how we retain them over longer periods of time. So.
In relation to exit interviews, there's a variety of ways that we can do that, and we often leave it to the person to make that choice. So they can fill in a form and then just leave and not actually talk to anybody. They can do that with their immediate line manager if they want to, or they can request somebody independent to do that. Our principal social worker looks at all of the exit interviews in order to understand and analyse what those exit interviews are saying. And if she picks up on anything that she's a little bit worried about, she will follow that up either with the person, because she is independent, because she's the principal social worker, or she'll follow that up with the team to see if there are any particular challenges at that point in time. I think the challenge we've got is we've got no one particular reason why people are leaving. If there was a mass exodus for a particular, we could do something about that, but people are leaving for a number of reasons. We've had people move to Cornwall. I mean, it's a long way to go to get to, to move away from Northumberland. Cornwall, Scotland, we've had, people move for family reasons to other areas. So it is a little bit difficult to just pin down what one of those reasons might be. Your third question, I can't read my own, creating our own agency. We have looked at that on a number of occasions. So we've looked at that both internally within Northumberland, but also looked at that regionally. And it's a really difficult area it's not a difficult area to get into. It's just a difficult area to establish. It hasn't gone off the radar, hasn't gone off the boil, and there are a number of ways that we might want to think about how we recruit staff, because equally residential staff for children's social care, there's a lot of talk about residential care homes in the adult world, but actually residential staff for children is difficult to recruit to currently as well. People don't, aren't always wanting to work in those areas. So we do need to think about how, as a region, we attract good staff who want to remain in the region. There was a regional workforce recruitment process in place, but it didn't really give us what we wanted to do. So we have kind of thought a little bit out of the box. And then the final question, because you'll be sick of my voice, I'm going to hand over to Graham, which is about support to teams.
Just on the regional work again, I'm chairing a regional recruitment and retention group around social work, and that's one of the regional workforce priority areas. So we're looking at that. I think it is a challenge to think about. Obviously, there's competition within the region for an insufficient supply of staff, but are there ways we can attract people to come to the region, which we are looking at regionally. And I think the support in teams, again, when we talk to the staff, the range of ways that it's supported both through the formal training opportunities. So, for example, our approach on signs of safety, the very significant training and support that have been offered to them, people are very appreciative of. But equally and particularly the kind of reflective and supportive way that the managers oversee and make sure they've not just doing what they need to do, but that they're getting the support and the outlets to make sure they feel okay about doing it, I think are very good here. And one of the reasons that we do retain staff as well as we do, actually, despite the challenges.
That's great. Can I quickly, I missed the question. Just regarding the academy, obviously it's great for new staff and people coming in to the service. What about expanding it to people that with more experience to be able to expand their skills, knowledge, and to be able to come into Northumberland with that extra level to know that there's a route as well for them?
We are considering a range of ways of how we can use and develop that model in key areas. So, for example, around first-line managers as well would be ways of looking at supporting that. So we are looking at ways of doing it. I think we just need to make sure we've got the supply right for the frontline staff, because that's our critical area of sufficiency, as it were.
Mr. Hodgson, been waiting patiently, so apologies.
No, don't worry. No, just out of interest, we refer to the cohort, but we haven't actually said how many are in the cohort. And like a lot of the, say, higher education, say there was 20, I don't know, would you offer 22 places? Because presumably now you've got data which would suggest that a percentage will not see the course through, rather than say just offer 20, lose 2 or 3, and you've lost 3 places. So is there a policy that actually offers more than the actual places to cover that potential loss of those that, for whatever reason, feel it's not for them and leave within the academy?
Yeah, when we started the academy, the cohort was 8 staff twice a year in September and February, March time. We increased that for the September 20 cohort to 12, and we've maintained that number, and that's by use of vacancies to do that. But what we've also had to find, obviously, is to make sure those staff get the level of support. So we've had to increase the management capacity and the other support for those staff. So it isn't just the vacancy numbers, it's to make sure they get the right support that retains and develops them. But yes, the answer is if we would get more good applicants than we've got nominated place for, we would look to take them in.
Right.
Absolutely. But I say again, I'll just make our dropout rate now is, the retention rate now is very good and has been for the last 5 cohorts.
So what is the sort of average dropout?
Well, so the dropout is on the first cohort of 8. I think 5 or 6 of those have gone. This was from 2018. The subsequent cohorts, we've retained the vast majority of them. We've lost probably 3 or 4 out of the other cohorts.
That's from within the academy?
Yeah.
So can we just clarify that though?
Oh, sorry, this is for them longitudinally.
That's what I'm saying. How many?
They haven't dropped out of the academy. We get the dropout from the academy is very, 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 in fact, maybe 1, I think, or 2 out the whole of the cohorts that we've had have actually dropped out, and because they are qualified social workers at the point when they come to us, and it's a bit like an NQT, but a slightly condensed way that we do that. So we get very little drop. That we have had. I think we did have one person who came and said, "Oh, actually, social work's definitely not for me." But we don't get a high dropout. The people who've left from the 2018 cohort are now qualified and experienced and have moved on to other jobs rather than them dropping mapping out. So, yeah, just to be very clear.
So just another point then. Do you actually have a specific link with a university or a group of universities? In other words, that the universities presumably will look to see this best practice of the academy, and those students that are studying to go into social work, is there a link that says, right, you know, we can have some practical part of the course, let's go and share this best practice that Northumberland have developed, and as a result of that, it's another stream of recruitment, because obviously, you know, the universities want to make sure that they have the practical side of the course, not just the theory side, presumably.
So sorry, Graham. So all social work courses have that element of practice in any case.
Yes.
So a significant number of the significant number of the ASYE Academy have been students within Northumberland in any case. Right. So they've done a practice placement within Northumberland. Although we do also get a high number of applications from other areas, those who've had practice placements in other areas as well. And you're right, we do link in with the universities, the relevant universities, to do with the relevant courses, in order to ensure that we've got a through flow of applications. To be fair, we've never had an issue with applications. We've always had many more applications than we've had places.
Right.
Paul Rickard, you wanted to come in with another question. Yeah.
So, sorry, briefly, it was just bearing all that in mind, and this may be more of a problem take down the wrong direction. Is the academy not something that could provide for other local authorities which would share the burden of management on it? So in a nutshell, you're almost creating a centre of excellence that you then share across north of Tyne, for example, and then Cabinet can kind of hopefully bankroll a bit more of that, but also get something back when they're training social workers of the future beyond Northumberland?
We have thought about that, actually. We have thought about how we might do that. I think we've been very focused on what happens within Northumberland in order to make sure that we've got the through flow of staff that we need in order to be able to help manage our demand. But it is something that we have thought about. We haven't progressed with it, but yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe a time to reflect on whether or not that might be what we want to do.
I just wondered if that might stop some of those exiting later. If you train them for the other authorities, then it means there isn't necessarily those posts for them to go to. They've had your training, and then if you get the package as good as it can be, not just pay, in terms of the other elements, maybe that helps. Sorry, Chair.
I think that is one of the things that we'll look at in the regional recruitment and retention group. Absolutely, that ways of doing that and building on what we know from the ASYE Academy.
You're on fine form this morning, Paul. Good. Right, so, John, go on, dive in.
Sorry, just one last point. There's a really interesting phrase on the last bullet point on page 36, which talks about unrealistic expectations. And I was just wondering who has the unrealistic expectations. Is it the new social workers? Is it the universities? Or is it their actual jobs that are unrealistic?
I think there are certain elements of being a social worker that some universities, colleges, staff don't really understand. I think Councillor Swinburne alluded to it, the fact that actually being a social worker is not for everybody, and sometimes people, after they've gone through the training, think, oh my goodness, that is not for me. And actually the realities of coming into a very busy safeguarding service where you are on the go from morning to night and dealing with some fairly traumatic situations sometimes means that our staff or some workers in some areas, and again, it's not unique to Northumberland, we know this from talking to our other colleagues in the region, the job that they thought they were coming to do is not the job that they actually end up doing, and it is, it is traumatic. So.
I appreciate that. So it's a training issue. Thank you.
So I think, Councillor Swinburne, and then we'll move progress on this.
Thank you, Chair. It was just picking up on a point that Mr Rickard said with regard to the expansion of the Academy. I'm aware that throughout Northumberland, the Council carries out services on behalf of other authorities and housing associations, etc., for which we charge for those services. And therefore, if we could possibly look at expanding the Academy, the other authorities who chose to take up that would quite rightly have to pay for that service. You know, you get nothing for nothing in this world. So, you know, they would subsequently pay for the service that they got from Northumberland and get an excellent service to boot. So it's a win-win all round.
I think your point's noted there. So if we can just have a look at what the recommendations are on the report, to note the content, we clearly have because we've all read it, and to identify any issues for further scrutiny. And I think we have given a very long list to officers this morning, and I look forward to getting some feedback on that. So on that point, we'll move progress on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is North East submission to the care review. And I think, Kath, are you taking that one? Yeah, Kath McAvoy.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This is just a very brief overview in relation to the North East ADCS, the Association of Directors of Children's Services, submission to the National Care Review. Just for a little bit of context, the government announced earlier this year, long anticipated and long awaited, care review would be undertaken by Josh McAllister. This is a once in a generation opportunity to influence the way that our social care within children's services looks moving forward. Number of key drivers in relation to this are around things like placements, which we've already discussed this morning, national demand for social care services within children's social care, workforce issues, and a child and a family's experience of the systems that are currently used to help promote safeguarding within children, both in the looked after services and also within the child protection services. The North East ADCS took a decision that they would undertake a piece of work and research and submit a submission, do a submission to the care review based on our regional experiences. We commissioned an external ex-DCS to do that piece of work, somebody who hadn't previously worked in the North East and wasn't particularly familiar with some of the challenges and the issues that were around. A task and finish group was set up in order to help progress and manage that. There were a number of iterations of the submission, and the final submission was agreed by chief execs leaders and the lead members within the region, and that was eventually submitted in July of this year. It attracted quite a bit of media attention, both from local, national and professional publication type arrangements, which was good because it sparked some conversations. And then we also had Josh McAllister come up to the region at the very beginning of October and talk to a group of directors and senior leaders to try and further influence the issues that we wanted to talk about. I think I've alluded to that there are two big asks from the government that we found from our own working, and that was around ensuring that the child poverty agenda was understood and helped to influence the policies in the future, and that the government also kind of developed a policy around child poverty, and that also the funding in the North East, because the North East has seen the biggest cuts in funding over the last 10 to 15 years, that the funding cuts were reconsidered and that appropriate funding was provided. I know that sounds like an obvious area for us to think about, but actually it is pretty crucial for the North East region, and the report alludes to the reasons for that. I think I just highlighted a few of the areas where the North East has got more stark data, and this, you've got to remember, this is the North East and not just Northumberland. So we've got the lowest life expectancy, we've got the highest level, we've got a high level of economic inactivity. The weekly pay rates are lower. We've got poorer health outcomes. We've got the highest proportion of children who are eligible for free school meals, and in the last 5 years, we've seen the steepest increase in children who are living with poverty. In terms of demand data, we have the highest rate of referrals to children's social care across the North East. We've got the highest rate of statutory involvement of children's social care. We've got the highest rate of children in care, again across the North East, not necessarily Northumberland. And our involvement, or the reasons for involvement with families in relation to mental health, domestic abuse and drug and alcohol misuse are much higher than the national averages. So we came up with a list of areas and recommendations which were linked to the themes around early help, partnerships and integration, the children's workforce, care markets, Ofsted and the regulatory framework, and the current system around family justice and how that is used to influence. So I'm hoping that people have had an opportunity to be able to read it, and it's a fairly easy read. It's a fairly uncomfortable read, I have to say, in relation to what it says about the North East. But we are optimistic and hopeful that some of the areas that we've tried to lobby about will come out quite strongly within the report.
So thank you very much for that. I mean, I think just a couple of observations on this, because you're right, it did attract a lot of media interest, is that you're quite right to identify this is about a northeast picture. So there are some very stark comparators between parts of Northumberland and maybe Gateshead, South Tyneside, and some other areas. But even within Northumberland, there are some very stark differences. So a couple of years ago, in the ward which I represent in Cramlington, there was huge national media interest about the fact that a young female born in the Northburn part of Cramlington would have a life expectancy of 103. And yet, probably about 2 miles away from where I live, that similar female born has probably got a life expectancy of about 86. So there are some very stark differences, even within very small areas. And this hasn't just happened over a couple of years. This is generational. And I think that the tackling of inequalities is probably, you know, for me, one of the biggest agenda items that any local authority or any government should have, because some of those inequalities can be supported by those first 1,001 days. So every single piece of data we have shows that those 1,001 days from birth onwards, those 1,001 days make a massive difference. So if you can get a lot of the system right then, it has a massive impact as you go on. And I know that, you know, everyone's nodding, so everybody knows this, but I think what's really important is that, you know, as a council, we understand this. I'm part of a poverty working group the council has, and I think it's a passion that we all share, irrespective of what people's politics are, that, you know, we need to get things right, because there are some very stark inequalities in our communities, but equally there's also some very good opportunities as well. And what we need to do is to have a fairer opportunity for people to get on that ladder, because employment is a fantastic way to ease some of those inequalities. But it's also very clear to me that we need to put systems in place to support people to get out of what can be a very dark place for some of them. And often they can't see how they get out of it. And I think, you know, for us all working collectively together is the way forward. And I think that the report was very good. I know that Councillor Ball wants to come in, so I'll bring you in.
Obviously, we've seen the child poverty figures for Wansbeck and the recent child poverty report that's come out. I'm just reading here, what would be considered appropriate funding? Because obviously it's not far from, we're talking budgets. So what would you consider? Can we put a number on that so we can see what we're fighting for as well?
I think the deficits from actually the overspends within children's services. I know that you know, I was joking a little bit earlier that we that our children's social care budget is showing an underspend for this time of the year, which it never normally does. And I think that's as a result of, and I have to say, you know, openly, there has been some investment within children's services in order to ensure that those budgets are not showing a deficit on a regular basis. But the reality is that it's not just about the funding that comes into us. It's also about ensuring that the care markets are managed more effectively, and that we're not in a position where local authorities are charged £17,000, £18,000 a week for a placement for a child who's got some additional needs, you know, which is where we are at in some places. So it's about a number of levels about managing that. It's about making sure that local authorities receive the relevant funding in order to manage the demands that come in. I don't think we can set a figure on that, because year by year that has massively increased. And if you look at the deficits, and I can't, forgive me because I haven't got the report in front of me, so I can't remember what the figures are. The figures across the North East and nationally, there's been a massive gap growing in relation to the funding levels. So,
can I just quickly come back in there? Because it's just, if we're saying that it's okay, the levels that we're getting. Where these figures are coming in about low life expectancy and all the other figures that we see about reading, writing in schools and things like that, if we're saying that there's enough money, then we need them.
No, sorry.
You know what I mean?
No, can I just be very clear?
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's enough money. What I'm saying is that Northumberland has ensured this year that there's been an increase in the funding levels in order to make sure that children's services doesn't constantly show an overspend in that particular area. But each year we are managing an increasing cost in relation to our children who've got additional needs in relation to education services for those who need extra support within the education system, so those children who've got special education needs, but also those children who've got additional needs and who need care, who need more specialist care. And that's the bit that we are constantly battling against, because whilst we internally as a council, we might be funding that more to get us on an even baseline. It doesn't really matter, because each year it goes up and up and up in terms of the spend. So this is about a national opportunity to be able to influence that. But also equally, it's not just about funding coming in, it's also about managing the costs of services that we commission in order to make sure that they are not, we're not fighting against each other. So if we offer one price for, we agree to pay one price for a placement, we're not gazumped, for the want of a better word, by another authority saying, well, actually we'll pay more than that because we desperately need this placement. So it's about managing the care markets to make sure that it's a realistic cost for the provision of children's social care.
That's great, thank you.
And again, I think it's important to mention that this submission was across how many local authorities were involved in total?
It was across all 12 North East local authorities.
So it gave a snapshot, and some of the data within that may not necessarily reflect Northumberland as a whole. But I think what we did and what we have been part of, and I'll come to Mark in a second, is that we made a collective decision to put a submission in, and I think we were right to do so. And you know, the one thing that I do know, and Guy Renner-Thompson will back me up on this one, when I was Cabinet Member Children's Services back in 2017, the one thing I wasn't going to tolerate was a cut to children's services. And I know Guy's as passionate as I am to make sure that that budget is protected. And by and large, we've done that. So Northumberland, I have to say, has pretty much booked a national trend. But I'm really proud that we've been part of this submission, because as a collective, there are pressures in our communities, whether they be in Northumberland or whether they be in the rest of the North East, and it's morally right that we put our case, and irrespective of the politics, it's the right thing to do. So, Mark Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, I fully support the fact that we have been involved in this. And yes, Kath, it does make uncomfortable reading. I just want to pull out a couple of sentences here from one part, where it says the children's care provider market should be dismantled or radically overhauled. Profit making from children's residential and foster care must be eliminated or capped. Children are not to be treated like used cars or houses to make profit from, and you know, to line people's pockets, and it happens far too many times. And I'm going to liken this to many charities. You see adverts for charities, you see people collecting money, etc., and they're always asking for volunteers. And many of these charities are of a similar vein. And, you know, people might not like what I've got to say, but you go up the chain of these charities to management and senior management, and you look at some of the salaries that people are on in these charities and these organisations. They're trying to, or they're advertising that they're providing this service, and no doubt they do. But somewhere along the line, there's a lot of people making a lot of money in these, and similar to this, I completely agree that children are not there to make money from. We need to focus on looking after them in an appropriate way and not treat them as an asset for profit. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this? I'm not seeing any. I think we're widely supportive of this, and I think we're all on exactly the same page. So thank you for your contribution on that, Kath, with the other directors to get that in. We're now moving to item number 9, which is the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme. Chris Angus.
It's always the work programmes belongs to the committee. If there's anything that members wish to add to the work programme, they just need to reach out either to myself or Councillor Daly as the chair. There's the January agenda's had a couple of things added to it that isn't on the work programme, so I think what I'll do is I'll send a new work programme out, especially with the change of membership, with the new items on. But in January there'll be the two cabinet reports following the informal consultation on Atkinson House and the Seaton Valley Federation. There'll be the Northumberland Strategic Safeguard and Partnership Annual Report, and as Graham said, the sufficiency strategy will come back for members.
Councillor Ball.
I did ask for something to be added on. I'm just wondering, will that be happening?
I think you had a discussion with, it was the... Yes.
School transport, yeah.
issue.
I keep forgetting to do that. So we will be bringing a report to the committee which determines the checks and balances that are in place to ensure safeguarding arrangements are in place. We've had to fit it in amongst all of the other reports. I can't remember what date we said for that. Chris?
It's appreciated, thank you.
Yeah, we are on to that. I know that you'd had some dialogue outside of the meeting, so didn't want to preempt anything on that one. Chris and myself and Richard Dodd will be meeting fairly soon just to have a look at adding some of the theme scrutiny elements on. So again, anybody please just drop me an email if there's anything you want to go into any detail about. But I think today's meetings evidence the fact that we're all very passionate about this, and we just need to make sure that we continue to have a very robust and challenging scrutiny committee, which clearly we have here. So very good. Right, so I'm coming on to the last item, which is urgent business. I'm not seeing anybody who wants to raise anything. I certainly wasn't aware of anything. So on that basis, I'd like to thank you all for attending this morning, and have a good day. Thank you.